Здравейте на всички наши приятели. Аз съм Георги Бакалов и основател на Дискусионен клуб Свободна България. Днес искам да ви поканя едно много специално събитие. Това е интервю с правнука на великият българин Илия Йовчев. Аз и екипът ни от Дискусионен клуб Свободна България сме били въвлечени в този проект за няколко години. Илия Йовчев е един от великите българи, първият българин, завършил университета Харвард в Съединените щати. Той е първи в много неща и животът му е един невероятен живот, така да се каже. Миналата година участвахме в проект, в който беше с Националната библиотека, и аз имах също привилегията да бъда въвлечен в този проект, не само аз, но Дискусионен клуб Свободна България и фондацията Българо-американски мостове на общение. Успяхме да сканираме вестник Родолюбец и той сега е на разположение на българската публика, на всички българи в електронната библиотека на Народната библиотека. Така че Илия Йовчев е един велик българин, който е бил от това поколение българи 19 век, които, излизайки от мрачните години на турското робство, той е един от тези хора, които е копнел да образова нашата нация, един от нашите, така да се каже, духовни бащи от тази ера. Какъв беше нашата изненада, когато успяхме да се свържем с неговия праправнук в Съединените щати, и той се казва Брандън Йовчев. So I'm with Brandon today. Brandon, greetings to you from, I'm in Minnesota right now, but on behalf of all of our Bulgarian friends, greetings to you from Bulgaria as if it were. And I just introduced you a little bit. You're the great-grandson of the great Bulgarian Илия Йовчев, except in your case, the last name has changed. So now tell us, how do you pronounce correctly the last name as it is today?
Sure. First, just hello to everybody in Bulgaria. This is quite an honor. So my family name is pronounced Youcheff. At least that's how we pronounce it today. And the only people in the United States, we spell it Youcheff. And the only people in the United States with that spelling are direct relatives of mine. My immediate family, my father, my mother, sister. Everybody else has a different spelling.
It's pretty unique in that sense. You don't have competition when it comes to the last name.
My father and his eldest brother and my grandfather actually have it on their birth certificate as Youcheff. So through generations, it seems that they started taking letters out and changing them a little bit. My grandfather's, he has a half brother, and his side of the family uses Youcheff. But I don't really know any of them. They're all, I think they're a lot of in the Ohio area, but I'm not too familiar with them. I just know that it's changed quite a bit, and we're the only ones with this particular spelling.
That's pretty amazing. So Youcheff, so Brandon Youcheff. How old are you, Brandon?
I am 39. I'll be 40 in what's today? The 4th. So a month from now, I'll be 40.
A month from now, you will be 40. And I don't know where to begin, to be honest. We had to work a little bit on the questions because there's so many things that we could talk to. But what I thought it would be really good is for us to kind of break it up in three parts. This conversation. Of course, a lot of people in Bulgaria don't really know about your great-great-grandfather. And I trust that as we create this video and the interview, and with all the materials that we're putting out, I trust more and more people will be learning about him and reading his works But this is really interesting because it's almost as we can follow in time how things transpired and after he passed on, and what that means to us and what that means to you. So why don't we start a little bit at first with just to tell us a little bit about more about you, the Youcheff family. Just what would you like to tell us for you, just in the general sense, as descendants of this great Bulgarian?
Sure. I mean, so like I said before, we're the only ones that use that spelling. If you go back to him, we have his name down as Yovtcheff, which differs a little bit from how you spell it. I believe it's Yovchev.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So as far as us as descendants for him, I think it's kind of unique that we're the only ones that have that spelling. It seems to change so much. There's at least 10 different spellings that I've found online, which makes it quite hard to research him. And so basically, my side of the family, I could tell you a little bit about us. We're pretty diverse as far as like the career paths that we've chosen and things like that. We've got healthcare professionals, artists. My father is a very well distinguished chocolate scientist. Worked for M&M Mars for 27 years.
Did you say chocolate scientist?
Chocolate scientist, correct. He was a product development for M&M Mars. And I guess the one product that's pretty well known the world over is the Dove Bar. And he actually has patents for that chocolate. So, personally, I studied criminal justice in college. Which is also, I know my grandfather was a corrections officer for a while, or a security officer at a prison. Anyhow, we're pretty well rounded in what we've all chosen to do. Didn't really know much about my great-great-grandfather growing up, so.
How did you come to know about him? What was when did you hear people talk about him, or when did you first become aware that he had a significant place in our history? Because, as you know, Bulgaria was under the Ottoman Empire since 1939 or 38, and 1989. When after all these years, when Bulgaria began to emerge, and of course the whole of the Eastern Europe and the Balkans began to loosen the grip of the Ottoman Empire before it officially fell apart. Your great-great-grandfather became the first Bulgarian to come to the United States and to graduate Harvard College. Were you aware of this heritage? And if you were not, when did you become aware and how?
So my first exposure to him was I guess you would call it a pamphlet or a flyer that it was speaking about his lecturing up and down the East Coast. He did a lot especially in New England, all through Connecticut, Massachusetts, New York. And that is how I first became known or aware of him, is my father has an original pamphlet.
He does.
Yes. So he has that filed away, but
did he come to you and kind of tell you one day, "Hey, you need to know this," or was it an accidental, or?
You know, I can't say for certain. It was I would have been probably a teenager when I first found out about him, and I think it was kind of just my dad was probably going through some old files and found it and said, "Hey, check this out." Or it's also possible. I'm not quite certain, but he might have gotten that pamphlet after my grandfather passed away, and that's how that came to be. But that was my first exposure to him, and it gives a brief little history about him, biography about being born in Bulgaria and coming over to Harvard and Hamilton College was the other college which that's in upstate New York. Talks a little bit about his lecturing and things like that. And then, I mean, it's 3 pages long. Most of it's just photos. Most of it's, I think I sent you a copy of it maybe, or Danielle at least I know has one.
It's possible you sent it to Danielle. So in which case we have it.
All right, it looks. I can actually pull up what I'm looking at now. So on the top of it, it says real big, the Honorable Ilya Yovchev, Bulgarian statesman, refugee, and lecturer. And it talks about, how he came here as a refugee and things like that. Just quick blurbs, really, not a lot of depth into the history, but it's certainly it was the starting place that led me to try to find more about him.
And you said you were a teenager at the time?
Yes. So at that time, the internet was just really coming around, and it was a little hard to bother to find anything or to be able to find anything. So I didn't actually find more about him until later in my life when I started to look back and take more of an interest in things like that.
Was this part of some greater family tree project, or were you specifically took interest more in his life?
It really started with that pamphlet, and it was more about his life. He's probably my only ancestor that I know more about, other than just a few like family stories here or there, or finding a birth and a death date on Ancestry.com or something like that. Ilya is the only one that I actually know a little bit about his life and was able to gain some insight into that. Let me see here if I could.
So how did you begin to find out more about his life story? Was there plenty of information? Was it difficult to track down all the pieces? It's like a grand puzzle, by the way.
Yes.
His life is so rich and so dramatic at times that it's just amazing when you try to put the pieces together and the timelines. It kind of blows you away.
It was definitely finding a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit over here, and trying to pull them all together. Most of the research that I've done, very amateurish kind of research, but a lot of it was through Google. And Google actually has a fair amount if you're able to figure out the different spellings and where to look. I found a lot of information in regards to his time at Hamilton College. There's a lot of alumni books, publications, some paragraphs here and there about him, and kind of compiling those and pulling those together is where I started to gain a bigger picture. But I would say it really wasn't until I joined up for the 23andMe service that gives you information about your heritage. And through that, I connected to a lady who turned out not to be a relative of mine, but she was able to provide me with the correct Bulgarian spelling of his name, and that opened up a new world to me. Using that and trying to use Google Translate and things like that. That's how I found Daniela, and I found some of her writings online, and I was able to translate that using Google. So that's, I mean, basically Google. I contacted Hamilton College, and I was able to get a little bit of information from them. The dorm room that he used to live in still exists to this
Is that
day.
so?
Yeah, it's completely different. All been refurbished and newly painted, things like that. But the building and everything is still there. Now I haven't gone up to look at it. That's basically how I got most of my information about him, is just from finding little bits and pieces here and there. You know, his immigration card and things like that were all on file with Ellis Island. I was able to find pictures of him in the Harvard University archives from a photographer that left all his stuff to them when he passed. So that's all filed away. I've been able to find little bits here and there, such as the Chicago History magazine has an interesting article about the Chicago World's Fair. And of course, he had a exhibit there, and they have a little picture about him and little maybe a few paragraphs written about him in that article as well. So it's really just pulling bits and pieces from all over the place and trying to figure it out. I was able to get my hands on this book. However, I can't read anything in it. I was trying to use like an app on my phone to try to translate some of the things in real time, and it's not as easy as I had hoped.
Well, it would be excellent. And that's actually one of the things that we're looking at, is potentially putting together something in English that will tell about his life and his story. I don't think there's anything available at this point in time, but perhaps together with you, putting those pieces of the puzzle together, and with the Plovdiv Library, we can put the whole story together and somehow produce something. I've worked with the National Library before on other projects, and I did a project several years ago. We sponsored an edition on the American missionaries in Bulgaria and a Bulgarian researcher. So it wouldn't be our first time. And I think that will be a really interesting project and really beneficial for people who would like to learn more about this period.
Yeah, I know my family in particular would be interested in being able to sit down and actually read a book or something with everything compiled, because when I talk to family members about them, they really don't know more than I've been able to provide them. There's a few stories that have been passed down. The main one being that, so his obituary that's in the Hamilton archives says that he passed away from a brain hemorrhage. However, I've been told now by 3 different members of the family that they learned that he died after being kicked in the head by a horse. So, yeah, it's
That's so.
I don't know if maybe that's a translation thing where hemorrhage and I think the one translation I saw said it was maybe a brain tumor, but I think it's I think that might have been something that was lost in translation, you know.
It's entirely possible. It's entirely possible. So learning about him, and starting with the pamphlet that emerged at one point in your family's archives, what got you going? What interested you? What did you think was, which part of his life? I mean, he worked as a detective from what we know in New York. He was a translator. He was an avid writer. Obviously, he was a preacher. But what is it that really interested you the most? Is there any specific aspect of his life and heritage, or just kind of like a general tracking down what he did?
It was more of a general tracking down, just to see what more I could find. And the more that I found, the more awestruck I kind of was with his accomplishments.
Right.
You know, he spoke with something like 7 different languages, I believe. He had his 2 newspapers. He ran the National Library in Bulgaria forever. No, not forever, but for a while. He translated the works of Dickens into Bulgarian.
I did not know that. Is that so?
I'm not sure if it was just a few select works or like an entire catalog that he did, but I know that he definitely did a few works of Dickens and translated them into Bulgarian. I mean, the fact that he fought against the Ottoman Empire, it just seems like he did so much in his life.
He did, indeed.
He was a process server, a lecturer. He was, as you said, a detective in New York City. Or actually, I believe the thing that I have says New York County. I don't know.
Okay.
What that was back then, you know, what the difference was, but and the only thing I really know about his time as a detective or a process server is just the fact that I have a listing from the district attorney that says this was his job in 1902.
Amazing.
So yeah, it's just a page from the New York State Civil Service Commission that says that he did that, and that's all I really know about that. I'd like to go down to New York City and see if I go in person, if I can find something more about that. Maybe in the New York Library, maybe they have, I'm sure they've got microfiche or something with the old, with all the old newspapers that I can look through. But
well, you let me know if you actually get down to it, because it's easy for me to jump on a plane. I'd love to join you for an exciting expedition like that, if you don't mind.
Spend a few hours combing through libraries and
right.
Oh, yeah.
So did you run into some of his writings in English in your research?
So the only pieces of his writings that I was really able to find were from translations of things that Daniela had put on Facebook. Like I said, I have the book that was, if I'm not mistaken, that book that I showed you earlier was taken from a diary of his that somebody found in like a secondhand antique shop or something like that. Is that correct?
Right. I mean, I believe that's an edition of the Plovdiv National Library. So
okay. So I have that, and I've been able to very vaguely be able to translate some of that and understand it. But yeah, most of my understanding of his writings all come from Daniela's Facebook page. So that was really helpful to me to find her and be able to get in contact with her.
She is our go-to person and great authority on all things Ilya Yovchev, and not only, she has a lot of writings about a lot of our Bulgarian brilliant minds, really, in the second half of the 19th century, who left great intellectual heritage. Unfortunately, it was suppressed by the communists during the 45 years of communist regime. So there hasn't been an effort on behalf of the educational system to really bring back to life so many of the writings, maybe because they run so much against the politically correct narrative. A lot of these men, especially, were in the second half of the 19th century, were keenly aware that the Russian Empire wanted to take over Bulgaria. And so what was presented for many years as the quote unquote liberation war, the Russian Empire and the Turkish Empire, I think altogether they had like around 10 different wars between them. Well, that war conflict towards the end of the second half of the 19th century was the last one. And during that military conflict, Russia won the war, and as a result, quote unquote, liberated Bulgaria. Or at least that's how it was presented to us. But most all of our 19th century revolutionaries, intellectuals, I mean, true patriots who cared about Bulgaria, they knew the sinister intentions of Russia were to actually take over. And they were staunch anti-Russian in their position. So I think your great-grandfather was as well. And a lot of that was a big part of the reason that their intellectual heritage was suppressed during the years of communism.
Yeah, you know, when I was trying to research a little bit about the wars and the Turkish and Russian and the Ottoman empires, and trying to figure all this out, because obviously I wasn't raised really learning anything about that history. I found it really confusing. It seemed like the wars went on for quite a very long time. And trying to figure out who was doing what and where was a little bit overwhelming. So.
Well, you know, it's not like the United States. You have two wars to keep track of: the Revolutionary War and then the Civil War, and that's pretty much it. Yeah. Well, then you have more wars in the 20th century, but I mean,
yeah, I mean, ours go on for quite a while as well.
Right. No, you're right. There are a lot of, basically throughout the 19th century. The Ottoman Empire took a long time for it to fall apart, and a lot of national movements and uprisings that kept occurring and reoccurring. And so Bulgaria was not an exception to the rule. So if we can just go back to a little bit to your great grandfather. Now, have you noticed in your investigation and research, as you kept like gleaning into his life and learning about him, did you run into some situations where you kind of felt like, yeah, I can see myself doing that? Or do you see that heritage somehow, or that gene or way of thinking or acting that you felt like, yeah, that looks like a family trait almost?
So yeah, I can say for certain that his, or at least what I can glean from what I know about him, he seems like he had a, how do I put this? A penchant to run against authority, I guess we could say. He seemed to value his own experiences and his own thinking. And he seemed to use that to shape his worldview. And I can definitely say for myself that I feel the same way. That I tend not to take things at face value as they're told me, that I dig deeper and find my own meaning within all walks of life, really. Right.
Yeah, he was a true example. I believe that's maybe something to be said about not just Bulgaria back in the day, but a legacy. Like I'll tell you, many times we would read, and I'm too bad. I have so many quotes and so many examples I can give, but sometimes we would just read the pages of the newspaper that he was publishing, and we would be stunned because it would be so relevant for today. It would be just so relevant for both for us as Bulgarians, and also scary because we would think like, wait a minute, this was like 120 years ago. My God, what has anything changed? And really, it's like he loved passionately Bulgaria. He really wanted people to start thinking differently, to think for themselves, as you would probably put it in the more simple terms.
Yeah, I would say that he's very much a free thinker.
He was. He really was, indeed. And I'm glad to hear that was passed on down the generation line. That's pretty cool. That's really cool. It gives me a lot of hope that maybe I'll succeed in passing on some of that to my children and grandchildren.
I can only try to imagine how his thoughts from those days pertain to Bulgaria today, because I'm not really familiar with what Bulgarian society is like. But not only that, I feel that they hold true for America as well, and pretty much everywhere.
Exactly.
You know, I remember this. I wrote this down. It was a quote that Daniela put up just a few days ago, actually. It says, "Our people are obliged to be interested in the affairs of those who rule it, and to exercise the power it has to keep their most capable and honest sons of clerical chairs, because without a wise government, nothing good can be done for a nation. And without serious vigilance by the people, power will be taken over by people who possess the most meanness and use the lowest means." And to look at where we are politically in the United States right now, I think that couldn't be more true. You couldn't have a more true statement now. It's funny because it was 130 years ago, probably. And people talk about history repeating itself a lot, and I think it couldn't be more evident in how true his words hold to us today, just as much as they did back then.
I would absolutely agree. And anyone who has, and that's why I'm so glad that we were able to scan all the newspapers that he published in Bulgaria, because they are very, very relevant to our own national experience as a country emerging out of 500 years of darkness, if you will. At the same time, I would love to see them, at least parts of those works, translated, because you're right, they're very, very relevant to anyone in the United States today who's like asking, what's going on? Where are we headed? You know, who are we? And how is this supposed to be done? He had a very, like you said, his worldview seemed to have been quite, the framework of thinking was, he was quite confident in it. And he was not shy from kind of giving his point of view. But I would find it, if something has stood the test after 130 years and you see the common sense in it, I would say that's a lot of common sense.
Yeah. And, you know, as I understand it, he was imprisoned for his American ideals because of what he spoke about in his newspapers.
Yeah, they called him the American. I think was pretty proud of it too.
And I was able to see somewhere online that said that while he was imprisoned, he was not treated well. He was beaten, and a plea from one of the guards and help from the guards is how he was able to become free again. And that's when he came over to America for the last time, and he was able to gain political asylum.
Mm-hmm. Great.
And also, speaking to that, I found out through Daniela that he opened up a Bulgarian and Macedonian immigration society in New York City as well. So add that on top of everything else that he did. It's just amazing.
Amazing. Very productive life. Very energetic man who never let down, despite of all the tragedies that occurred and the loss of a child, I mean, pretty amazing how you can pick yourself up and just keep going. Pretty amazing. So as we kind of wrap this up, at least for this time, so I'll just reserve the right to call upon you at a later date as we discover more of the puzzle.
Please, yes.
So,
and I know my father would be interested as well if you'd want to talk to him at some point.
Really? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I would love to. Here's a couple of things that come to mind. I haven't been to the Bulgarian embassy in a long time in New York. It was, I think the last time I was there must have been in the late 90s or so. But I would love to do something more than just recover the writings. To be honest, There's several ideas that come to mind that I think would be of great interest. I would like to get some of the books and also to donate some copies to the embassy, maybe. But in Bulgaria itself, I'd like to think about publishing a book in English for the United States, and we would invite you to be part of that project if you want.
That would be amazing.
But also in Bulgaria to see more. I'd love to see a memorial of some kind, or if we can find, I know there are great Bulgarian artists there. We can find, if we can negotiate with one of the municipalities for us to have a bust or something like that, to just help our people to remember again about such a great person that your great-grandfather was. What part of his mission and work in those days do you find somehow relevant to you personally? Is there something that connects with you and you see maybe as an extension of what he did many years ago, maybe in a different way, but somehow in the same footsteps of what you have interest? I know professionally you're involved in whatever you're involved in, but I'm saying as a greater mission in life, do you see something that you could see yourself doing that might be an extension of what he did so many years ago? And in a greater sense, what might be relevant for us here in the United States from what he did?
Well, really just what I had mentioned before about him being a free thinker and really not allowing other people to shape or to tell him what to think. I think that's something that everybody can learn from, to really not take things as they're told you at face value, but to do your own research and use your own life experiences to gain a further understanding of the world around you. And I think that holds true to everybody everywhere, not just Bulgaria or America, but.
Have you had any interest in writing yourself and putting your thoughts in a written form?
Not really. I was never much of a writer, but I really love to read a lot. And that's actually, I did want to ask you something about, I don't know if you're familiar with his Bulgarian Wikipedia page at all.
No, I'm not. It's one of the things that we maybe can look at. No, I didn't know it was a Wikipedia page.
There is an entry on his Wikipedia page that makes the claim that he was the first science fiction author in Bulgaria, that he wrote a science fiction book.
Okay, so I'm familiar with that work, and what it was is, I'm not sure if it was a translation of a science fiction or he authored something original.
Okay.
I read somewhere, and they had another very similar work that I think what he did is he took a very famous sci-fi work in his day and he adapted it to Bulgarian. So it wasn't a straight up translation, but it was almost like adapted translation of some kind.
Right.
But the people in Bulgaria didn't know this, so they put it up as he was the first sci-fi author. I think the story is very interesting, actually, because yes, one of the things that I love about his whole way of thinking and doing things, and it just really speaks to me, is that even though I passionately agree with all of his Christian convictions, which I hold very dear, he was not a man of dogma. He was not a blind dogma follower. He saw the world for what it was, tried to figure it out, and tried to educate as many people and to teach them not what to think, but how to think. And translating sci-fi or Dickinson shows you that he clearly understood. It takes a lot more than just dogmatic beliefs or of any kind, even the ones he held very dear. He said he just really wanted people to know, hey, open your mind, see what the world what it is.
Yeah, and I don't think more truer words can be spoken than that right there.
Great.
I did find some other stuff in my research that I think that the Bulgarian people might be interested in. So just trying to do some general research into him in Bulgaria, I came across Aleko Konstantinov. Is that correct, how I said that?
Aleko Konstantinov, yes.
Konstantinov, okay. And his famous book, To Chicago and Back. And Ilya is actually mentioned in that very, very briefly.
Really? I did not know that.
He really just says that he went to the World's Fair, and he came across the Bulgarian exhibitions, and he says Mr. Youcheff was there, or Yovchev. Is that correct?
Yes, Yovchev. Yovchev.
Mm-hmm. But it also mentioned that I found out a little bit about this anti-hero caricature that's well known in Bulgaria, Baiganyo. Is that correct?
Baiganyo.
Okay. Right. It seems that not my great-great-grandfather, but one of his helpers at the World's Fair exhibition was the direct inspiration for the original caricature of Baiganyo. Yeah, right. So, yes.
How was the prototype of a character connected? Was he an associate or someone in his circle, or?
I believe he was one of the helpers that he had at his like little exhibition booth or whatever there, and that's how that came to be. That Aleko sketched him on the back of a napkin while sitting there, and it grew into what it is, you know, a big anti-hero kind of. How would you describe Baiganyo?
It would be, I guess, in Aleko, I think he has a saying that we have survived because we've laughed at ourselves, and one of the part of the reason. Well, it's a way of a critical, of course, examination of your own culture and kind of like the worst case scenarios, the people that you kind of scratch your head and you say, are we part of the same country, really, you know? I guess in America an example or comparisons would be like someone who's like a real hillbilly versus someone who's like a sophisticated urbanite or something like that.
Right.
And a lot of these people in the 19th century, they perceived the Baiganyos of the day as a leftover from the Ottoman Empire. You know, people who were very simplistic. They didn't aspire to growing in any way or being cultured. They were just okay with being, you know, unashamedly just rude and inconsiderate and that sort of stuff. So he wanted to just really, in a caricature way, to say, hey, don't be like that. Just don't be like that.
Yeah, that's kind of how I was able to perceive it as well, that he went to the Bulgarian exhibition at the Chicago's World Fair with more of a hope to see a modern Bulgaria represented. But what he found was a throwback to the more antiquated practices. Ilya, when he did his lectures, he dressed in the traditional garb and things like that. So when Aleko saw that, he kind of voiced his opinion that he wished a modern Bulgaria would have been represented rather than that. And that's how, when he saw the people helping my great-great-grandfather, he kind of found it to be a bit of a joke.
Is that right?
Yeah. But I mean, that's not. I don't think that he felt that what they were doing there was. I don't think he made light of it. He felt that it was important, but at the same time, he wanted more to be shown. You know. So.
Yeah, no, and I can understand the desire of someone like Aleko who would want Bulgaria to be represented, and I can totally understand Ilya Yovchef wanting to show people something more authentic and more, exotic, and that's right. Attention. He was a good marketer too. So
yeah.
So that's perfectly all right. Well, Brandon, this has been a tremendous pleasure for me to meet you and to talk with you, to learn about you and your family and your interest in your great-great-grandfather and his legacy. Truly a treat, to be honest. And then offering for maybe for your father to be part of this conversation next time. We can have both of you.
Yes, we do it all at the same time. 3 people on the screen here.
Maybe you can share with him. You had a good time doing this interview, so we can do a little more. We do have some other projects that, like I said, in the works and kind of what we're thinking about. So we'll definitely keep you posted. And I cannot wait to produce some translations. So just for you to kind of hold in your hand something confidently translated.
That would be wonderful.
Just to pass around to your family members and for them to learn more about him. So with that, I will just say thank you once again and wishing you all the best here during these very interesting and difficult times that we're and people all over the world are facing. Actually.
Yeah. No, and thank you, and thank you to Daniela as well for setting all this up, and it's quite an honor to be able to give some insight as to my thoughts as to Ilya, and I hope that I can only just continue to learn more about him.
And we'll pass on to you everything we learn as well, an attempt to help you further with discovering more of his legacy and your legacy by extension. As we go down the road. Truly, Daniela is very, very much part of the reason, even for today. She would not let me just forget it. She would not let me drop the ball. So she's great with that, and she's been very much the heart of the soul of this project and research and fundraising for this. So I am very pleased with this. Thank you once again on behalf of myself, our team, our discussion club. We have a community of people that every month we get together and we talk about liberty, about Bulgaria, about which way should we go. We have guest speakers. I hope to maybe have you virtually as a guest one day. Maybe you can talk to us a little bit about what does it mean to think independently, Ilya Yovchev style, through his great-great-grandson as a speaker. That will be a treat. But I'm truly happy that I was able to have this interview. Thank you for your time once again.
You're very welcome, and thank you.
Forward to being in touch with you.
You have a great day.
Thanks, Brandon.